Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suttress here. Man, we've been talking about some of Cullen Bunn's books for the last few weeks, and now Cullen is here. Witchhammer, the first Aftershock Comics graphic novel, came out this week, and Cullen is here to talk about it. Also, Dark Arc, the Brothers Dracul, and so much more that he's been doing for Aftershock these last few months. It's great to talk to Cullen, catch up. And not only are we talking about that, but also we reach back for some of his old DC work and old Marvel work and current Marvel work. It's a great conversation, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. This episode of Word Balloon is sponsored by Aftershock Comics. They're shaking things up at your local comic shop right now with hit series like Animosity by Marguerite Bennett and Raphael De La Tour, Lollipop Kids from Adam and Aidan Glass and Diego Yapur, A Walk Through Hell from Garth Ennis and Gorn Sudzuka, as well as today's subject, Witchhammer, Aftershock's first graphic novel. It's out now. I love Aftershock books. I think they would make excellent Christmas gifts, and you will hear me touting Aftershock throughout the interview. But I'll tell you, they do. They have great books with great creative teams, and you will find interesting stories that will either fit your needs for your Christmas list or if you're shopping for someone as well. But you don't have to take my word for it. You can check out full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on these books to order through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. Word Balloon is also brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners via Patreon. Thank you, League, for your continued support. It means a lot. It keeps Word Balloon afloat and keeps me active and keeping the lights on and reaching out and doing new conversations with some amazing creators. If you want to subscribe to Word Balloon, you don't have to. It's free. But if you can afford it and think what I do here is interesting and you want to help promote the cause, you can subscribe to Word Balloon by going to patreon.com/wordballoon or clicking on the front page of the Patreon ad at wordballoon.com, and you will get to the portal to our Patreon page. Thank you very much for your support, League of Word Balloon listeners. All right, let's not waste any more time. Let's get into our conversation with Cullen Bunn about Witchhammer, the Brothers Dracul, and a whole lot more from his work at Aftershock Comics, also Marvel and DC talk as well, and even some Star Wars talk. I think you'll enjoy this conversation with Cullen Bunn on today's Word Balloon. Cullen Bunn, welcome back to Word Balloon. Great to talk to you, and excited to talk to you about all the current projects you got going on, man. Very cool stuff.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, man. I don't know if we've ever done a one-on-one. I know I've done a couple of Marvel pressers with you in them, but long time coming, man.
Yeah, I don't think we have either. I think we've done a couple of like little things at conventions, like drop-bys and things like that. But and then of course, like you said, the Marvel press meetings and everything. But no, I'm glad we have the chance to talk like this.
Absolutely, man. Well, congratulations. They gave you a nice little assignment at Aftershock, their first graphic novel, Witchhammer.
Yeah, no pressure. The first one.
But you got an old collaborator working with you on this.
Yeah. I'm working with Dalibor Talajic, who worked with me on one of my very first Marvel projects, Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, and we've worked on a few things over the years, and this is our first creator-owned project that we're working on together. So I was pretty excited to get the chance to partner with him on this project.
Well, they're tapping into your love of horror with this, but it's also kind of a police procedural as well.
Yeah, it's a weird little book. It's it's definitely got a lot of horror trappings. It's got demonic worshiping and serial killers and things like that. But it's probably more of a police thriller with some supernatural trappings and supernatural twists to it.
That's excellent. Now, was this something that you had in your back pocket, or like how did this happen in terms of it coming to Aftershock?
So the book is called Witchhammer, and it's interesting because it's one of those projects that I've had the kernel of an idea for a little while, but I didn't necessarily put it all together in a way that told a good story until I was talking to Aftershock, and I'd done a couple of books with them. I did a book called Unholy Grail and a book called Brothers Dracul, and
Yeah,
I'm currently doing.
We're going to talk about those in a few minutes, but yeah, go on. What else are you?
Yeah, and I'm doing an ongoing with them called Dark Ark, and they Joe Pruitt at Aftershock gave me a call and said, "Hey, we've got this really great idea for these original graphic novels, hardcover, sort of album sized, very European almost in size." And that all speaks to me. That's all stuff that I geek out over and that I love. I love, really high quality production values on these graphic novels and things like that. So I was immediately interested. And then he said, "Well, that's great. You're going to be our first one." And I was like, "All right, great." And I gave him in that phone call this kernel of an idea that I've been dealing with, which was, it's a story about a serial killer who seems to be targeting people who have a certain religious bend, and that bend is that they worship a devil figure, or that they're witches, and they were intrigued by the idea enough to ask me to expand on it and really dig into it, and that's when I really took that initial story idea and expanded it into the book that you get that just came out.
Tell me about the cops that are hunting this demon down.
Yeah, I wanted to have sort of a traditional cop pairing. So we've got these two agents, Agents Frontenac and Agent Guinness, who have sort of a very different takes to their methodologies, but more than that, they're a different approach to faith in general. Agent Frontenac is a woman of faith, and that causes her it caused her to do some soul searching over the course of this story, as the victims, that the people that she is trying to protect and save, have very different belief systems than she does.
Sure.
And Agent Guinness, on the other hand, is a man who has no faith. He believes he believes religion of any kind is sort of a dodge and a dive, and he doesn't believe in anything. And his that non-belief of his is challenged over the course of this first graphic novel, as well, when they start encountering things events that do not have a readily, an earthly explanation.
Sure. No, that's great, man. And I love that idea. It's beautiful. So Talzik really does a great job. And,
oh yeah. It's a gorgeous book.
And also, as you say, it's like the intent is to do more. I mean, this is gonna be a series of graphic novels.
Well, that's if how these things work. It's all dependent. It's all dependent on on the reaction of the readers and demand for it. But while this first volume of Witchhammer definitely tells a story, it also leaves the door open for to expand that world and to delve into that world in a bigger and different way. So I would love to revisit it for sure.
That's excellent, man. No, I read it, and again, it looks great. It reads fantastic, and it's a very cool cop horror procedural. And I'm always happy when genre splicing is going on, and they work well together. And I think a lot of people that like the classics, like Jim Corrigan and the Spectres, kind of chasing stuff down in a police way, and there's kind of almost an X-Files feel to it as well, with a Mulder and Scully, non-believer and believer kind of relationship. No, they're a good team, and I think it's a really good procedural, man. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I think my hope with this book is that readers it'll open it up to some discussion about who's right, who's wrong, who are the villains, who are the heroes, because it's kind of a story that I'm trying to flip the switch several times in the course of this graphic novel. I want to flip the switch and see if we can change who people see as the as the villain, who
Sure.
people see as the hero. So I'm excited to see what people think about it.
That's excellent, man, and it is already out as we're recording and putting this episode out. So, no, I think it's great, and I've been touting it as a good Christmas gift too, because it's a new original graphic novel that could be the opening of a new series. And I always think, Christmas time, it's hard to find something good for a comic reader that they aren't already getting from their pull list.
Yeah, absolutely, and you don't have to. It's one of those books that if you've got a comic reader in the family, you have less of a chance that they pick this up since it just came out, and it's an easy jumping on point because it's the first book in the series, and it does make a great Christmas gift for sure.
Yeah, man. No, it's beautiful, and it's like you said, a nice package. And I'm full disclosure, as people know, listening to Word Balloon the last few months, Aftershock is a Word Balloon sponsor. But I really do talk about the books that I really do like that Aftershock has been putting out, and including Witchhammer. I would say the same thing about Unholy Grail and Brothers Dracul, because they're two sides of the same coin in a way. Because I want you to describe Unholy Grail first.
So Unholy Grail is a dark take on the Arthurian legends. And it's basically the concept is everything. It's a horror version of the King Arthur stories.
Yeah.
Every story, every myth from the Arthur legend, and there are dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of them, could be presented in this book. But if in being presented in this book would be a very twisted, evil version of that story. So yeah, it's definitely sort of a. I told Aftershock that I seem to be doing a lot of historical horror with them.
It's true.
And so that was the first thing I did with them. And is actually a book. I pulled up one of my old notebooks from like 26 years ago, and had my first. In that notebook are lines I had written with the intent of telling the story of Unholy Grail. So it's it's something that's been brewing for me for a while. I just needed to find the publisher who was crazy enough to put that out.
Understood. And then, as I said, the other side of the coin, the Brothers Dracul, which is like the Ottoman Empire, Game of Thrones, mixed in with the Dracula legend.
Yeah, it's again, it's sort of a historical horror story because it's even more based on history rather than the King
Legend.
Arthur myths.
Yeah,
This is the story of Vlad and his brother Radu. And history's a little sketchy on some of their lives, but the one thing that we do know is that they were taken hostage and held prisoner by the Ottoman Empire for a time. What we don't know, or what history hasn't told us, is that during that time they were trained as vampire hunters. So it's the story of Vlad Tepes and Radu, his younger brother, going out fighting vampires, and it's a really sort of balls to the wall, bloody horror story with that conceit.
Well, we know where it's going, but this is the journey of Vlad to his ultimate fate.
Yeah, and we even the series starts with us seeing Vlad as Vlad the Impaler, who killed thousands and thousands of people in the most horrific ways. But this is how he got there, and it is tied in with vampire legends because hey, it's Vlad Tepes. He's very very ingrained with vampire legendry.
Was Radu really part of the legend as well?
Radu was his brother. Yeah,
wow.
Radu was a historical figure, very handsome young man, according to legend. That he was known as Radu the Handsome, and but yeah, he was a real guy.
Well, and these are, kind of, again, like Unholy Grail, although Unholy Grail, as you say, is a little darker. This has a lot of adventure, and again, you see Vlad at times as a hero as he's going through his path, and again, you find the catalyst. I don't want to give it away. But
I think
why he changes.
He's presented here as a tragic villain for sure, and definitely starts out as the hero.
It's great, man. No, that really caught my eye, and I really enjoyed the volumes that I've read of that. How many volumes of Unholy Grail?
There were 5 issues. So
okay, so one collection.
It's one trade paperback, and we've talked about going back to it and doing more with it. But for now, it's just the one volume, and that's the nice thing about Unholy Grail is that the legends are presented in such a way that I can tell this story out of a linear order. In fact, the first volume is told there are several stories presented outside of a linear order, and we could go back and tell more and more. And Brothers Dracul, there's one volume has come out, and we set it up to enter a new arc if we decide we want to.
I hope you do, man, because I've enjoyed the issues that I read, and I think there's obviously room for both of those series. No, it's great, man. Honestly, I enjoy both of them. I think they're terrific. Now, what's the other run that you're doing with Aftershock? Is it Dark Arc?
Dark Arc. Dark Arc is the ongoing series. We're in our 3rd arc right now, and Dark Arc is a pretty simple idea, and it's one that I never in a million years thought a publisher would pick up and go for. And Aftershock was crazy enough to go for it, and the reaction to it's been great. But Dark Arc it's set during the time of the biblical flood. And we all know the story of Noah's Ark. Noah gathered animals and took them, on an ark to sail to, the world that would come after the floodwaters receded. But what we didn't know is that there was a second ark. And on that ark were all the monsters and the vampires and the werewolves and the minotaurs and the dragons. Every horrible, monstrous creature was loaded onto a second ark and is at sea at the same time. And as you can imagine, that kind of the inhabitants of that vessel offer a number of major problems and complications. And it's like I said, we're in our 3rd arc, no pun intended, our 3rd arc of the series right now.
Who's the Noah of this series?
There's a sorcerer named Shrey. So this is Shrey's arc, and Shrey is very much a Noah figure. Only he serves dark masters, and he has great dark powers. But he also has a family that he wants to save from the flood. He has a wife and daughters and sons that he wants to make sure survive once the floodwaters recede. So they are his motivation for taking this task, and he's a guy that was not a good man in life. He definitely, you got to think this is a world that the Lord decided needed to drown. So it wasn't a great world anyway, and he probably should have drowned, but he's trying to be a better man now. He just happens to be surrounded by monsters.
Like you said, man, historical horror. This is very interesting.
Yeah, I always think, what if this was all taking place in the same world, and I could have some sort of crossover event, with all these different
absolutely
these different stories. But who knows?
That's very funny, and you could even drop hints into Witchhammer, which is obviously the modern world.
Right, yeah,
but,
just all
maybe
ties
artifacts
together.
or anything that might tie back to one of these things. No, I think that's great, man. That's a cool little Bunn universe you got going over at Aftershock. That's really cool.
Yeah, they've been really great to work with. They're they're open to working on a lot of fun projects and things that stories that a lot of publishers might not jump on, and they're willing to take a chance on some things, and it means a lot to me, and it's fun in terms of the kind of stories I get to develop.
Absolutely, and again, I think you're working with great artists on all the books. I didn't ask earlier, but tell us who drew Unholy Grail, who drew Brothers Dracul, and who drew the Dark Arc.
So Unholy Grail and Brothers Dracul were both drawn by an artist named Mirko Kolak. Um,
I know that
uh,
name. Why do I know that name?
well, he worked with me on some Green Lantern stuff or some Sinestro books and
Cool.
things like that. So he's been working on a number of different projects. I think right now I may be mistaken on exactly what, but I think he's doing some Red Sonja stuff for the new Red Sonja series with Dynamite. That don't hold me to that, but I think that's what I've been seeing him draw a lot of Red Sonja stuff. So I think that's what he's moved on to.
Okay.
And then Dark Ark has been every issue has been drawn by the great Wando,
Oh,
um,
sure.
and and he's just having a blast drawing all these crazy monsters and designing all these wild creatures that are on board this ship.
Very cool, man. No, that's terrific. No, it's like I said. I think you got a nice little corner of Aftershock right now, the Bunn horror universe. So that's that's excellent. Very, very cool. And again, I think any of these would be great Christmas gifts. So people should consider them. Absolutely,
Absolutely.
They're a lot of fun.
And your local comic shop has them, so
Excellent.
or should have them.
Well, and as I say, we've got the diamond codes over at AftershockComics.com.
That's right.
So no, and yeah, I mean, people can check out the preview pages and everything. This is good. I haven't talked to an Aftershock creator in a while, and it's a good way to kind of point out, as I do in the middle commercial as well, that you can get nice little samples over at the website and figure out exactly what it is. And see if it's, to your taste or to the person that you're trying to buy a Christmas gift for. Too.
Yeah, I think in some cases they have full issues and things like that posted so you can read big chunks of these stories to see if if it appeals to you.
Very cool. That's awesome, man. No, I'm glad you're with them. I'm glad they're recognizing what you bring to the table, and that's cool. And again, it would you say? I mean, you've done your fair share of superhero books. But would you say that do you enjoy doing more of the horror genre stuff rather than straight up superhero?
Well, it's tough because I grew up reading these comics. I grew up loving the X-Men, for instance, and reading those stories and I was a superhero guy. Always have been, and to some degree I always will be. I love superhero stories. But I've had plenty of opportunity to write those characters, and I will continue to write those kind of characters. And that it scratches a certain kind of itch, and there's a certain kind of satisfaction with contributing to those greater storylines. It's a very different kind of feeling when you write your own, create your own stuff. It's definitely all on you, and it's rewarding in very different ways. And I'm I would never give up my creator-owned books. And yeah, I do write a lot of horror stuff with creator, and I tend to. It's not the only thing I do with creator-owned, but the most of my creator-owned books veer into some very dark territory. Maybe that's just It's my way of examining my place in this world, I guess, through these dark stories. But it's just that's my wheelhouse.
I hear you, man. Well, I know before we get to a Marvel book you're currently doing, I think I've told you before, one of my favorite runs you had was that Captain America Team-Em-Up book that they were doing.
That was one of my early projects with Marvel, too. Yeah, yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, and it's he lends himself to a team-up book in a way that Spider-Man did as well. And I mean, everybody wants to work with Captain America. He's the man.
Right, and that was it was right after Avengers, the movie, had come out.
Sure.
And they were definitely wanting me to team him up with characters from the Avengers movie, so it would be names that people walking in, looking at the shelf would recognize. But yeah, I still I had a lot of fun doing that, working on that book, and it's still a book. Like, I've done a lot of presentations lately at high schools and middle schools and things like that. And it's one of the books that I take with me and give to the kids because it's in a lot of ways, it's kind of got some all ages, elements to it. And it's a book that those kids can enjoy, and I don't have to worry about warping their minds or destroying family values or anything.
But they were great, like one shots, and
Yeah.
Was there a two-parter in that run or no?
Oh man, it was all, but it's hard to imagine. It was all
One shots, right?
no, it was all series. It was I think the first one, the Captain America and Hawkeye, was maybe a 4-issue run.
Oh,
I think most of them were. I think most of them were 4-issue runs, and then there was a weird one shot, which was Captain America and Namor, and then most of them had had at least 4 issues to them. I think Iron Man might have been 3 issues, but yeah, it was either 3 or 4. Yeah.
Wow, man, I didn't remember that. I thought they all, and maybe I am thinking of the Namor one in particular, because I am always happy to see Cap and Namor together. Their history going back to World War II, and it seems like usually, depending on who's writing it, that if Namor has the respect for one of the Turanian here, or over the regular superheroes,
Right?
It's definitely Captain America, because they're like old war buddies,
right? Yeah, no, it was a fun series. It's you're taking me back now. I'm take me back to the good old days.
Absolutely, man. Now I should ask, because obviously the movie's coming out this weekend, Aquaman, and I know you had. As far as some Aquaman fans, you had a bit of a contentious back and forth.
Wasn't my favorite writing experience.
Was it because of that kind of friction, or was it tough to write? Were there heavy editorial hands, or
it was tough all the way around. There were a lot of problems with it. The fans reacted the way fans that they were going to. There was a lot of weird things, like there was sort of a drive to make sure Aquaman was on land, most of it, which I thought was a weird note. And I probably, thinking back, I should have pushed back on some of those notes a little bit, and it probably would have made for a better series. But there were some notes that I probably should have pushed back a little bit. There were some changing landscapes and changing directions for characters that caused some issues. And I'll be honest, when I look back on that book, I'm still fairly happy with that story. I know why why diehard Aquaman fans didn't like it, because it wasn't the Aquaman they wanted and needed. But I still have fun. I still like a lot of what I did with that series. But yeah, it wasn't my favorite writing experience in the world.
Let's take a break from our conversation with Cullen. Tell you a little bit more about Aftershock Comics. Now, they have been sponsoring Word Balloon for these last few months. I believe in this publisher. They do a great job. Joe Pruitt, Mike Martz, reaching out to a lot of creators like Cullen and saying, hey, try to do your stuff here. You heard how Cullen got involved with Aftershock. Some amazing books with great genres, covered by some of your favorite teams of writers and artists. There's things like the Spy series, Jimmy's Bastards from Garth Ennis and Russ Braun. You can get Pestilence from Frank Thierry and Oleg Akunev, where the 14th century Black Plague from history is actually revealed to be the first zombie outbreak. In fact, you can get the first trade now. Maybe that would make a good Christmas present. And then in just a few weeks in January, Volume 2 is coming out. There's Baby Teeth Year 1 hardcover from Donnie Cates and Gary Brown. The first 10 issues of that series is collected and already out. In the weeks ahead, I'll be talking more to other Aftershock creators about their books, but you don't have to wait. You'll find full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on these books to order through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. All right, let's get back to our conversation with Cullen on today's Word Balloon. What were some of, when you did superhero books, and you're right now you're doing one of the superhero books, and we'll get to it in a second. But yeah, as far as past runs, were you satisfied with your Green Lantern work and your Sinestro work?
Oh yeah, I loved Sinestro. If I could, if I could still be writing Sinestro now, I'd write Sinestro for 100 issues and be happy. Same with Magneto. Same with Uncanny X-Men and X-Men Blue. If I could have stayed in the X universe for forever, I would have. And I had a lot of fun writing Deadpool. So I mean, I can find something I enjoy with almost every character I've written. but yeah, X-Men and Magneto and Sinestro, those all rank pretty high for me. And yeah, I would have stayed with those characters for as long as I could have. If we were in the days of old where a creative team could stick on a book for 100 issues or more, I would still be on those books. But those days, sadly, are not as frequent as they used to be. Those kind of runs don't happen often.
No, I hear you, and I do think that, certainly I think editors feel like, readers want a switch after a year or so, 12 issues usually, or 18 or whatever.
Yeah, well, the idea basically boils down to a number 1 issue sells better than a number 36 issue.
Sure.
And a new number 1 issue seems newer when the creative team changes. And that's just the way marketing approaches the books. I don't like it personally, but I understand it. It's not what I like to see, but I understand why marketing teams like it that way.
Is the door open at DC? And do you have an interest ever going back to DC and writing?
Oh yeah, I still talk to them, quite a bit. It's just a matter of finding things that work with my schedule and work with, fit into the schedule they have. I did maybe a couple of months ago. I did an issue of Suicide. I did a Suicide Squad annual for them. So I'm still out there and working with them when I can. And if I were to find the right project, I would love to work with them again. I'm at a point now. A few years ago, if someone offers me whatever project it is, I would have taken it because I wanted to, get my name out there and get books. But now it's more important to me to find the right project and a book that, there are some books I shouldn't be writing. I need to accept that. And even if I want to write them, there are some books that are better suited to other creators. And when those, sometimes you get offered a project and you need to, and the best thing to do is just turn it down for the sake of the greater good. And that's where I am now. I only want to do books that I think I can really, really nail and that represent this amorphous brand that I'm trying to build.
That's cool. I'd love to see you do things with like Shadow Pact or something like that as far as DC
Shadow
goes.
Pact. Yes. Now, Shadow Pact's a book that I'd fall all over myself to write.
I think it's in your wheelhouse, man. Absolutely. Yeah, all those characters.
Shadow Pact is one that I love. It's funny because most editors at DC don't remember these characters. Oh my gosh! Now I can't even. I'm losing track of the title in my head. It was a rock band full of horror of monsters, with Scream Queen and all these other monsters. It came out in the 90s.
I don't remember that book. Oh wow! All right, there you go. Yeah, 90s book. Okay.
It's a book. I even took my single issues because it's never been collected by DC. I took my single issues and went and had them bound in hardcover.
Good for you. That's great, man. Yeah. Oh, I love
Scare Tactics. Yeah, I couldn't remember the title for a second. But yeah, there are characters like that even the editors at DC, they say, if you had a dream project, what would it be? And I typically go to Swamp Thing and Hellblazer and Scare Tactics.
That's cool.
And they say, what? We don't know that one.
For me, my favorite DC forgotten horror book, and it was an anthology, was Wasteland.
Oh, I'd forgotten Wasteland, but yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
I'd forgotten that was a DC book. Yeah.
I about a month ago, right before Thanksgiving, I had dinner with Mike Gold.
Sure.
He was the editor of it, and that was John Ostrander and also the great Del Close, one of the great comedy minds of Chicago. And Del was just a crazy off-the-wall guy that lived life to the fullest. And when he died, he wanted to promise that his skull would be used by Steppenwolf Theater. And whenever they have a production that calls for a skull, they use Del's. And Del winds up in the playbill.
Well, yeah. Well, there you go.
So he's still acting.
He's giving himself some longevity in the theater world.
Absolutely. And for people who don't know, he was the accountant in The Untouchables, and he's also one of the teachers in Ferris Bueller. And he's just it's a throwaway, like only one scene, but you love him because he's lecturing in a very weird way, and he's like, "In what way?" I mean, that's what everyone just remembers. The delivery.
You remember him, yeah.
And he was, he was a great comedy mentor to, from Bill Murray to Jon Favreau. I mean, a very interesting group of comedians, and Vince Vaughn, all learned under Del. And he just Wasteland was so amazing. And I as I was having dinner with Mike, I'm like, why doesn't DC put this thing out? Because all the top artists worked on it, on the various stories, and they were really cool, creepy stories. And a lot of them were from Del's imagination, and John would help him flesh them out and stuff. But it really was such a distinct series, and really, I would say right alongside Suicide Squad, just really great stuff. Where it's funny because again, I love John, and I always want to know how well he's doing, because he's had some issues with his eyes in the last couple of years. But yeah, I just think, man, he was such a strong force at DC in the '80s. And I'm glad when they would let him do the newer Suicide Squad, issues and arcs in the last few years around the time of the movie.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that to me, because I'm going to add that to my want list, because I remember them, but I don't think I read all the issues. I seem to remember it only lasting a few issues, and I guess it ran for a couple of years, maybe.
It might have been bi-monthly or something, but I know I don't think it made it to 20 issues, and maybe it did. But I'm gonna look it up now, and that's going on my list of things I want to collect because I have fond memories. I had forgotten. Seriously, for some reason it just didn't dawn on me that was a DC book. But no, I'm glad you reminded me. Sure, man. It was very Vertigo before Vertigo, and really several years before Vertigo was up and running and everything too. Yeah, I know. I'm a huge fan, and like I said, no, John. I really like John a lot as a guy, and I really like John as a writer. And he did an amazing job for Dark Horse, and when Dark Horse had the Star Wars stuff, and was writing incredible Star Wars stories in the '90s and right up through the mid 2000s until Marvel retook over the Star Wars stuff. Have you done any Star Wars stuff?
Yeah, I've done. I did a 5-issue Darth Maul limited series.
Cool.
And I've done an annual of the main Star Wars book, and I'm stuff I can't mention, but I'm working on some other stuff for Star Wars right now.
That's excellent, man. No, honestly, again, taking nothing away from the Dark Horse stuff, because it really was top shelf storytelling, both the artists and the writers. But it is fun to have that Marvel has it back, and I know they've put strong teams on there, man. And again, top writers and top artists, and it doesn't surprise me that you've done a Darth Maul story, and I look forward to whatever you got coming up in the future. But in the meantime, you got a cool current Marvel team now, and it's the Asgardians of the Galaxy, and I love it. It was such a great play on words. It's like, oh my God, why hadn't anyone thought of this before? That's fantastic.
Yeah,
and good timing too, because they're really leaning into the humor of the Guardians of the Galaxy. So tell me about the Asgardians of the Galaxy 4 issues.
Yeah, and this is a book that I pitched to Marvel in 2015. I sent them a pitch and said, and it was very high level, but I said, wait for it, Asgardians of the Galaxy. And, I pitched them a team and a couple of, initial, story arcs and things like that. And there was interest. They liked the title. And I heard from at the time, they didn't want that. It just wasn't the right time. And I'd even heard from people who were in the offices at Marvel. They would, months and months and years later, and they would say, "Hey, do you know that they've still got Asgardians of the Galaxy listed on the bulletin board as a book they want to do?" And I kept telling, whenever someone would tell me that, I'd say, "Well, I hope they remember I pitched it." and don't hire someone else to write it.
Sure.
Which is, could easily happen with as many creators as they work with. But no doubt, the success of Thor Ragnarok, and the Infinity Wars movie, that kind of opened the door to let it be, that it would be the time to do an Asgardians of the Galaxy book. So it got greenlit, not long after, the success of those movies. But yeah, it's just what it says. It's a group of Asgardian characters or Asgardian adjacent characters
Yep.
going off on cosmic adventures, and it's a book that I really wanted it to just be a fun read and to be goofy at times and weird and sort of a throwback to the rollicking good time of older comics, but at the same time show some of these characters you may not get to see as much of.
Well, and I love kind of the melding of Asgard characters with the cosmos, because it does make sense, and it shouldn't, but it does. And it calls back to that 70s time when you could do mashups of, as Kirby did, with not only with the Asgards, but with the New Gods and the Eternals and things like that. And it makes sense.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's a fun book, and I get to use some characters that I might not get to write otherwise. So we've got the Shi'ar and the Nova Corps and Nebula and Planet Terry and all these characters from Marvel's cosmic side that we get to throw in a book along with Loki and Angela and Valkyrie and the Executioner and Thor Frog, who's our breakout star, I guess.
Everyone loves Throg, man.
Yeah, they like that frog.
And also Eric Masterson's son.
Yes, and he's a character that I didn't think I would like writing as much as I do, but he's a lot of fun to write.
Yeah, he reminds me of James Robinson Starman as a guy who's trying to live up to the legacy, but can't help being the modern guy that he is too. Yeah,
he's young and he's kind of a dope, and but he does have this legacy and he has this power, and he's just trying. This is in a lot of ways this is his side of this story is learning to become a hero and to live up to that legacy.
No, that's cool, man. And I picked up the last issue with the Nova Corps showing up, and that's why, yeah, man. It's it really, I as a little kid, it really was fun seeing science fiction and mythology rub up against each other. And I've had these conversations with Oming as well. We were both big Eric von Daniken fans, Chariots of the Gods.
Oh yeah, I have read those books many times.
Absolutely, man. And although I got to say, at first I really appreciated Ancient Aliens, but it almost feels like they're kind of covering the same territory over and over again. I don't know.
Well, yeah, they're going. They may have gone to that well a few too many times.
But yeah, I know I loved that stuff as a kid, and again, and really a lot of Marvel Black and White touched on a lot of that stuff too. Epic Illustrated and some of the whatever the magazine was, I have it. The first appearance of Star-Lord was one of those Marvel Black and Whites.
It was like a Marvel premiere or something, wasn't it?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and like I said, this is a book, and the issue you just picked up has one of my favorite panels of any comic that I've ever written for Marvel, and it's drawn by Matteo Lally, who I've worked with numerous times at Marvel on Deadpool books and things like that, and he's really just doing some amazing stuff. But there's a panel with Throg leaves his hammer behind on the Shi'ar homeworld, and Gladiator, the magistrix of the Shi'ar world, who is arguably, he's basically Marvel Superman. He's one of the strongest characters on, in the Marvel universe. And there's a panel, just one panel of him trying to pick up this tiny little hammer, and he can't do it. He's straining, he's giving it all, he's digging in, and it's just the greatest. It's such a fun panel. I would paint that on the side of a van because
That's awesome, man. That's fantastic. And I mean, how's the run going?
It's good. Yeah, I think the reaction's been pretty positive, and we're getting ready. Marvel's got their War of the Realms event coming up, and obviously, an Asgardian book is going to connect to that as well. So we've got some War of the Realms connections coming up, and in some future issues.
That's excellent. Anything on the horizon that has been announced that you can talk about?
Not with Marvel.
And anybody.
I think there's another book that hasn't come out that I'm doing a book with Archie called Blossoms 666.
Yes.
Which is it's part of their horror line, and it's the story of Cheryl and Jason Blossom, who were introduced in the 90s in Archie comics as I always call Cheryl Veronica's Veronica. She's
totally,
and she's sort of the breakaway star of the TV show Riverdale. She's very she's very big in that show. But in this comic, we reveal that the Blossom family knows that they are going to give birth to the Antichrist, and Cheryl and Jason both believe that they are that person. Only one of them is the Antichrist, and they're kind of having a competition with each other, doing awful things to the kids of Riverdale to prove who is worthy of the Antichrist title.
That's hilarious, man. I just talked to Victor Gorlick over at Archie, and he's very happy with the horror books and how well they're doing, and certainly Sabrina on Netflix has been a nice book. And, a nice show. And certainly Riverdale. God, I'm very happy for all of them. I love the Archie characters. And it's been really cool seeing, I mean, it's starting with Life with Archie, which certainly wasn't a horror book, but I just love that they've, kind of stretched what you can do with Archie. And then, certainly what they've done with the TV shows. But yeah, man, I mean, God, all the comic books have been amazing as far as the horror Archie comic books. And yeah, I'm all for Blossom 666. That's fantastic. Wow.
Yeah, it's I think it's going to be a fun book. It's with art by Laura Braga, who is just awesome. And I mean, they just released some preview pages of it this week, so you can see what it's going to look like. I mean, it's just it's a pretty book, and it is funny, but it's absolutely a very dark. It's a very dark book. So it's some dark humor in this title because, like I said, Jason and Cheryl are really awful to the kids of Riverdale, and they have a lot of fun being awful to them. So,
no, it's a good opportunity, exactly, for putting them through the flaming hoops and everything.
Right.
I think that's terrific. That's great, man. Hilarious. Well, and again, like you said, Cheryl herself is she's like if Mary Jane were just a little more
mean.
Yeah, mean, basically. Yeah. And it really was like, whoa, there's the redhead. And it's like, yeah, it's about time. And I do remember when she debuted and everything, and it was like, wow, who's that girl? And it's that's exactly what Archie needed.
Yeah, and it was back when she first appeared, it was shaking up the line to some degree to have her appear. And then that's something that I think Archie's been good at doing, is shaking up the line, and that's what this. Like you said, you mentioned Life with Archie, but yeah, then definitely the horror books have just it's shown them that you can do almost anything with these characters, really.
And the hallmark of a great comic book, that you can stretch it and do it in various genres. I was just talking to Tom King last night, and I was saying about the Mort Weisinger Superman era, and people point at that, oh, isn't that goofy? And it's like, you got to go contextually of the times, and they were kind of still suffering through the comics code, and so you really couldn't show Superman destroying that much. So it's like, all right, what can you do? So, well, all right, big, giant atomic insects were all over the movies back then. So let's have red kryptonite turn, Superman into an ant head, and
right?
Things like crazy stuff like that, and or even as silly, but again, because it was part of pop culture. There's Pat Boone in a Superman comic. There's Alan Funt and Candid Camera, a very popular 50s and 60s TV show in a Superman comic. And yeah, that was kind of the role, was to show that, Superman was part of, just contemporary with its era. But again, I think it showed the strengths of what you can do with Superman, and also a lot of the other great superhero characters that, you can just, they're kind of indestructible. You can take them into really crazy directions. And the real good ones are resilient, and Archie's universe is certainly like that as well. I love Archie 1941. That's totally the other opposite end of the spectrum. It's a tremendous drama.
Yeah, and it's I think, look, I love, obviously I'm a fan of dark, scary horror comics, but I also am a firm believer that we take comic books too seriously sometimes, and that that doesn't help us. It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't. It kind of stifles creative freedom, and you're cutting out a lot of great stuff if you're too diehard and take it too seriously. You have to be able to take some chances and do some things you might not expect in these books, Archie and otherwise.
No, 100%, man, and also too, the 5-issue arc that a story might start out a certain way. And people are complaining about issue 1 and 2, and like, well, that's not how he acts or she acts.
Right.
It's like, well, it's the early chapters, man. Like, let this writer get home with his story and then talk about it. And also, by the way, fine, that maybe it's a story you don't like. Okay, fine, come back in 6 months. I don't know.
Look,
I'm never offended.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was a diehard, reader and collector in my youth, before I was ever creating comics, I was absolutely a continuity. Everything had to be in continuity, and I had to know where everything fit inside the story, and where this issue of Doctor Strange tied into this issue of Spider-Man, and I wanted to know all those things. And to some degree, you never shake that. I still have hints of that pop up, but I think people nowadays are defining their own continuity. I'll talk to a reader who says, "Oh yeah, I love Batman. I don't read this Batman title, and none of that exists to me. But this Batman title is what I like." And I was like, okay, so basically now you're just defining your own continuity. And I hear, you think about the Star Wars movies, and people say there's a way to watch, you can watch them in different orders and get different things out of them, and believe certain, cancel certain movies out of the continuity of the films. And that's great. You know what? If that's what brings you enjoyment, and that's what makes comic books enjoyable to you, more power to you. It baffles me to some degree. It's interesting to me, but whatever. I'm all for people reading comics and enjoying comics in whatever way works for them.
I do, absolutely, man. Now you mentioned Star Wars and the Star Wars films. I liked Solo. I don't understand the hate. I didn't think it was a perfect movie, but I also didn't think it was a bad movie. I have
no problem with Solo at all. Yeah. I think it was a fun movie. I know I heard that I stay away from a lot of that stuff, like the online hate and the ranting. I just don't have the energy for it.
Well, so we're adult men. No offense to those who hate that strongly. That might also be adult men or women. But it's like, I understand. It's like, hey, it's just supposed to be entertainment. I don't know.
Yeah, but I enjoyed Solo just fine. And I was as a kid, I was the biggest Star Wars fan there has ever been. And I was not a huge fan of the prequel movies when they came out, because it wasn't made for me. And I don't feel like those were movies that I was supposed to enjoy as much as a younger group of kids. I found more respect for those movies over the years because my son loves them. And, I watch him watch them, and I'm like, okay, he loves these movies. I can love them because he loves them, and I can love what he loves out of them.
Yep.
And then, this new batch of movies, I think they're fun. And I think some are better than others, but I thought Solo was a great movie. I have no problem with Solo.
Yeah, I was talking about Ron Howard, I forget with who in the last couple of weeks, and it's like, yeah, man, it's like he did fine. I'm like, Solo was good.
Oh, yeah.
Also, pretty hard job to come in mid-production and try and take it over and reshoot about 75% of the movie or so. And I'm like, looked great to me. Thought it was a very entertaining story. So yeah, no, I enjoyed it. Yeah, I don't know. And
And
yeah,
you mentioned Aquaman earlier, and I'm going to go. I've already bought my tickets. So I bought tickets a little while ago. So I'm going to go take the family to see Aquaman over the weekend. So
excellent. I'm rooting for it, and I certainly want it to be great. And I like Momoa a lot. I think I've liked that guy since Stargate Atlantis.
Yeah, I may be wrong, but I think it's going to do very, very well. I think it's going to be a big one.
I hope so, and yeah, I mean, and truly, I mean, there've been missteps with the DC movie universe, but I'm always rooting for them. And I'll tell you another thing. I got to tell you, Titans, the TV show. I saw that trailer and I'm like, I don't know, fuck Batman. What the hell's going on? but honestly, I've watched every episode and there's still one to go as we're recording, and I'm like, I like this. And of course, the Titans are very different than the way that they're depicted in the comics, but I do like it. And God, those standalone episodes with the Doom Patrol and the Hawk and Dove episodes are amazing.
I haven't watched any of them yet, but the Doom Patrol stuff is the one that would. And I was a huge Titans fan as a kid too. I just haven't. I haven't watched a whole lot of any of the
streaming stuff.
Of the streaming stuff. Just because there's so much TV and so many movies right now, it's hard to make time for everything.
Oh yeah.
But seeing the Doom Patrol stuff has really it's got me interested in checking it out for sure.
I mean, and I know that the episode is kind of a backdoor pilot, and they are moving forward with the Doom Patrol series. It's exactly what you want it to be, and it really, awesome. It's very faithful to the comic in the best possible ways.
Sure.
So yeah, no, I enjoyed it immensely. So excellent. Well, Cole, I wish you continued success. I think you're doing a great job, and I'm glad you're telling your stories at places that appreciate the kind of work that you do. Your Aftershock books and what's going on at Marvel, both with Star Wars and, of course, the Asgardians of the Galaxy. And I'm glad that Archie got wise and got you for Blossom 666. That sounds fantastic.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it, man.
That's Cullen Bunn. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation at Word Balloon. It was all brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. To subscribe to Word Balloon, you can do it via Patreon. Go to our Patreon ad on our front page of wordballoon.com, or you can go directly to our Patreon page by typing in patreon.com/wordballoon. Thanks a lot for your support, League of Word Balloon listeners. Again, Word Balloon is brought to you by Aftershock Comics that are shaking things up at your local comic shop right now. Incredible series, things like Donny Cates and Gary Brown's Baby Teeth Year One hardcover that came out this year. There's also great books like my buddy Paul Jenkins has his fantastic series Beyonders. There's also Animosity from Marguerite Bennett and Raphael de la Tour, and Lollipop Kids from Adam and Aiden Glass and Diego Yapur, A Walk Through Hell from Garth Ennis and Goran Sudzuka. Great creators that have come to Aftershock to tell very distinct stories and not have to worry about continuity, but just telling great stuff where anything can happen. And I think, Cully's Witchhammer book, the first graphic novel that Aftershock has put out, is a classic example of that. Don't take my word for it. You're going to find great books from Aftershock at their website with full story descriptions, preview art, and also the diamond codes to order your books at AftershockComics.com. Thanks again for listening. Great stuff coming up from Word Balloon in the days ahead. I know that it's the holiday season and a lot of podcasts. It kind of fascinates me. A lot of them are like, yeah, this is our last show for the year. And, it's like December 10th or whatever. Not a Word Balloon, man. I mean, we take you right to New Year's Eve, and we'll be there the first week of 2019 with new shows as well. I know guests are busy, and I've been banking a lot of interviews these last couple days and weeks to ensure that you're covered through the holidays. I know everyone is traveling. I got a great plan for pre-Christmas weekend for a great show to release and give you something cool to listen to on the way for your holiday travel, and on the way back, more interesting interviews, tremendous conversations, first-time discussions. Old friends have come back as well, and I can't wait to share it with you to close out 2018 and usher in 2019 as well. Another great year for Word Balloon, man, and it's a lot of it has to do with your support by listening, telling people about Word Balloon. The audience continues to grow, and all I can do is have these great conversations and present them to you every few days right here at wordballoon.com. So until next time, thanks for listening. Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2018.